Hey Jim, I hope you're doing well. Um, I'm gonna First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break down your swing here and show you what I see currently, and then I'm gonna provide you with a couple of different options in terms of remedies. Um, we're gonna look at the down the line view here on the left first. The thing I want to call to your attention is how fast the right arm retracts back behind the rib cage, and what I mean by that is imagine if you're focused on the seam on your shirt right here, the rate with which your right elbow flexes and moves across that seam in the backswing. And that gets your right arm and right shoulder very internally rotated toward the top. And if you look at the face on view, kind of the reason why that's happening is because there's some restrictive motion in your pivot. Your hips aren't turning very much. Your shoulders are late to turn, and therefore you just start pulling that right elbow back behind you, and you get in that internal position. From there, you match that up with this big slide of the lower body and this tilt back of the spine. And the problem is the right arm gets kind of left behind you. There's a big disconnect between your lower body and your upper body. You see this big gap here. It's like the lower body's running off and leaving the arms behind, and that's because the right arm is in a position where it's retracted, pulled behind you, and internally rotated. So when you start down, it stays in internal rotation and it stays back behind you in this direction. Now, that's as you keep coming down and you keep tilting back to shallow the shaft with that right arm back behind this right hip, eventually the hand path can't go around the corner. It's going to move out to the right because of all the tilt to your spine at this point. And when that happens, you have to start rotating those forearms and those wrists and closing that face down, and you get kind of the timing element associated with this high rate of closure here. You can see that as well. The excessive tilt back over here on the right, and the kind of the roll release. So a couple different options here. There are some good ball strikers who have that right arm move that you are demonstrating there, and one that comes to mind would be a guy like Charley Hoffman. So if we take a look at Charlie's move on the right, you're going to see kind of that same, internally rotated, retracted right elbow and a flat shaft going back. So you can see it's a very similar move to what you're making. And he has kind of a low arm plane at the top, very, very similar to you, with the right arm in almost identical position. Now, here's the thing. If we're going to go down this route, the matchup that goes with that is a lot of rotation of the body. So you can't have the slide to the pelvis that we looked at from down the line view and the tilt back of the spine. You have to really, really spin open and rotate open like you see Charlie doing over here on the right to make this work at a high level, because you can still kind of control the club face a little bit. You still see the hand path being thrown out to the right, similar to yours, but look at how open his lower body and shoulders are at impact versus yours, because you're just tilting the spine back so much. So if we're going to go down that route, if we're not going to change the arm structure, we're going to live with this backswing, then we have to get rid of the slide of the pelvis and get rid of the tilt back of the spine. So I'm not sure which one would be easier. The other option would be to go down the Dustin Johnson kind of route, where you see a lot of external rotation in the trail shoulder right off the bat. So again, if we look at the seam line on the shirt, you're going to see this right elbow staying more in front of that seam line because he's going to rotate the trail shoulder externally right off the ball. So you can see that external rotation. The hand path doesn't move in, and he just externally rotates it all the way to the top. And what that does is it gets the right elbow more down in front of the rib cage on the way down. And what that does is allows him to turn the corner more with the hand path and kind of stabilize the club face. So there's two different options here. You can experiment with both. I've got players that do both of these moves. I've got guys that externally rotate all the way to the top. And what does that feel like? It just feels like you're trying to get the shaft in a flat position in the backswing by rotating both the lead forearm, we call that pronation, and externally rotating the trail arm. And a good thing for you to feel or think about there is, again, the illustration of not allowing your right elbow to get behind the seam line on your shirt. I'll tell you what the keys to this matchup are. Because we're not getting a lot of hand path depth, we have to have a lot of freedom of rotation in the lower body. So we've got to have the pelvis turning a lot, which will allow the shoulders to make a big shoulder turn, because the length of the swing is not going to come from the hand path travel like yours is getting. It's going to be coming from rotation. So you'd see the trail leg really straightening out. You'd see the left knee flexing and rotating inward, and you'd see that right hip working high up and back. So those are two viable options that you can try to fix these. I think that given your age and physique, that you're probably not going to be able to get super open like a Charley Hoffman is. So I would probably lean more towards changing how your right arm is working in the backswing. I think that's probably the easier move in the path of least resistance. But you've got to get rid of some of that hip slide in the downswing and some of that spine tilt in the downswing as well. Hope this helps you. Shoot